Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. My name is Yves Veulliet. As a member of IBM's Global Diversity and Inclusion team, I lead IBM's Disability Inclusion agenda globally. And in this capacity, I am honored to be the chair of the ILO's Global Business and Disability Network in 2019. And I will be your moderator for this second webinar in the 2019 series. We have attendees today from the private sector, NGOs, DPOs, universities, and higher education institutions, as well as UN entities and independent consultants. For those of you who are not familiar with the ILO's Global Business and Disability Network, or GBDN as we call it, I would like to say a few words about the activities of our network. GBDN is an employer-led initiative that works to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities in workplaces around the world. Its members include multinational enterprises, national business and disability networks, and international not-for-profit and disabled people's organizations. The network runs a series of webinars as a way of promoting and sharing group practices in disability workplace inclusion. Now, a couple of logistics remarks. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please contact Zoom via the help feature. Note that today's webinar will be recorded and available on the GBDN website later. Participants are muted and can ask questions about the content through the Q&A box only. Well, I want to welcome also AI Media, who will be providing today's captioning service. You can update your captioning view in Zoom under Settings, Accessibility, and Closed Caption Font Size. Today's webinar topic is about globalizing employee resource groups on disability. In recent years, the use of diversity networks in organizations has increased tremendously. Diversity networks, also referred to as employee or business resource groups or affinity networks, are initiated to inform, support, and advance employees with similar interests. In many organizations, diversity networks are part of a larger diversity management agenda and an increasingly popular practice to promote equality, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. And I'm very, very happy today to introduce our two speakers. I will first introduce Kate Nash. Kate is creator and CEO of PurpleSpace, which is the world's only professional development membership hub for disabled employee networks. PurpleSpace delivers leadership know-how to network leaders and is becoming the go-to global community of disabled employee network leaders across all sectors. She chairs the Show Trust Power List Power UK, which celebrates Britain's 100 most influential persons with disability or impairment, and is a member of the Minister's Disability Confidence Business Leaders Group. In 2007, Kate was awarded an Order of the British Empire, OBE, for services to disabled people. There will be time at the end of both presentations to ask the presenters question through the Q&A button. And so without further delay, I will give the floor to Kate. Kate, the floor is yours.
That's wonderful. Yves, thank you so much indeed for your very kind introduction, and it's just fantastic to be able to join you today. So I can see straight away you have shared the slides with the group. So let me crack on, and in the time I've got available, share with you a little bit about what we do and why we do it, and a bit about the origins and how we came about. And crucially, I suppose, share with you some of the trends that we're seeing when it comes to the establishment of networks and resource groups and the impact that they are having within the organisations that they have. If I may, on the first slide there, or the second slide, that's it, brilliant. So as you say, our mission is to deliver a single source hub for the professional development of employee network and resource group leaders. So what we do is to focus on the connection between those network leaders and build quite a fresh, interesting, animated and energetic community across different sectors and increasingly across geographies across the world. Our service goal, so what we're set up to achieve, is to deliver content, both in terms of how you deliver cultural change vis-a-vis disability within an organisation, but also what you have to do as a leader, I suppose, to step up to the opportunity that often network leaders have around driving change. And as we know, network leaders, resource group leaders are all doing this on the top of a busy day job. You know, I haven't come across any employee across the globe who is not, you know, is not under occupied. We are leading very busy lives, and the one thing that these network leaders and resource group leaders have in common is that they're doing this work on top of a busy day job. So what we try to do is to deliver know-how around how you drive disability change so that they can support their inclusion and diversity teams, but equally they can support business leaders to do differently and better. So that's what we're all about. And our higher purpose, as I say, is all about developing community and to grow and support that community to learn across the piece. Our strapline is that we collaborate to innovate. So we happily sit alongside many other different types of employer networks. So we've worked very closely with Business Disability Forum here in Britain, equally the Australian Network and Disability, and so on and so forth. So we're all about developing network leaders and allow others to do what they do best, which is around improving what we call the top of the shop. So in terms of the next slide just shares with you a little flavour of the types of companies that are joining PurpleSpace. So yes, of course, lots of local organisations within the UK, but now global businesses are using PurpleSpace as a vehicle to support the delivery of know-how across employee resource groups in different parts of the world. So EY are doing that, GSK are doing that, Shell have just recently joined. They have a number of networks across the world. Yes, that there are significant cultural differences and opportunities in different jurisdictions, but there's a commonality of theme. In terms of the next slide, in terms of why are we seeing such a growth around resource groups, I think it's often the case, and wherever you look across the world, we constantly see disability framed often as a recruitment issue. And of course, it's highly proper that organisations think about how they can improve their recruitment practices so that they are recruiting disabled people in the numbers that we would expect. But unfortunately, what we see has happened over the years is that quite often the subject of disability is often seen as just a recruitment issue. And yes, as we know, the majority of disabled people, wherever they are in the world, so those that are acquiring their disability are mostly at the age of work. So between the ages, anything between 18 upwards, so workforce age. So it's not just about recruitment, it's about individuals who are having to grapple sometimes with a human experience that possibly they would prefer not to have, and are having to understand how they deliver their work in the context of that human experience. So what we see in terms of, so why networks? Networks are a fantastic, rich source, both in terms of support for those individuals, but equally what a business can learn. So how can they learn directly from their own people? I think the other thing I'd pull out, why the growth of networks? Well, again, general trend and a universal understanding that resource groups, when they're well structured and they're well resourced, they can often be a really low cost and high impact way of generating cultural change. And what we're picking up, interestingly, is, and although it's anecdotal, what we're picking up again and again is that businesses are often saying that they can be more cost effective. So I go around the world saying networks and resource groups can't run on fresh air and enthusiasm. Of course, the reality is that many do that, and yet they can do better with a bit of investment, and they can do better when they have senior executive support. And then over time, when they have that love and attention and resource and structure, they can actually become a really powerful vehicle for generating system change within an organisation. So in terms of the next slide, PurpleSpace came about through a book that I led some years ago, Secrets and Big News. A good number of multinational companies were involved in helping support that book, and we were very lucky to draw on the support in Britain from Business Disability Forum. What the big book did was to interview 2,500 disabled people, 55 employers, and we started to try and unearth some of the challenges. Why is it that often disabled people don't share information about their disability or their ill health in the context of work? And many of you dialing in, many of you listening, many of you part of the network, you will know that often, on the one hand, your knowledge about the numbers of disabled people that are likely to be in the business don't always match the reality. And the purpose of the book was to unearth what is happening there. Why is it we don't always find it easy to share information about our disability? For some of us, we have no choice, it's very obvious, but for others of us, it's less obvious, and therefore we have a choice as to whether we share that. And yet sometimes if we choose not to share that and we don't feel able to bring our authentic selves to work, we can often struggle to secure the adjustments that we might need. So PurpleSpace came from the messages that came out of Secrets and Big News. It came out of the big ideas that we created for employers and employees to try. And as a result of the messages, there was a massive call from organisations, local and global, for us to come up with a low cost and elegant way of sharing best practice across network leaders across the world. So in terms of the next slide, if I may, a couple of stats, and I won't labour on this, and we'll make sure that this material is available so that you can draw on this. And if you need more information about the results that came from the book, we'd be very happy to help you source that. But two statistics I wanted to share. So one of the questions that we asked the 2,500 disabled people who took part was, if you have shared information about your disability or your illness, your injury or your accident with your employer, what was the primary reason? So what is it that makes you do that? And you can see there at nearly 60% that the primary reason why people will share information about their impairment is that they need their employer to make an adjustment for them, or they need it to be taken into account in the way that they do their job. So on the one hand, we can say, well, that's of no surprise. But I think what the book did, and what the messages, what the research did, was start to create some shape around what are the true reasons why, I suppose, disability is sometimes what I would call last on the list in terms of the different protected characteristics. So if you think about gender networks, ethnicity networks, LGBT plus networks, and we see different stages of those networks in different countries across the world. What we do see as a universal truth is disability is a little bit behind the curve. And therefore, one of the reasons why that is the case, and we haven't developed a more meaningful narrative around disability, is because we as individuals often find it hard to identify with the language of disability. And therefore that makes it much more difficult to create a narrative and some traction, and for us to lean into our careers and want to support the business, because we're struggling to make sense as to what or if we share. And then the second statistic, very quickly, and the converse was if you haven't shared information, why is that? And again, no real surprise there, but it started to give some shape as to what is happening. So at 60%, you can see there individuals, what we would call fear-based reasons. So people worried that if they share that information with their employer, there may be repercussions in either now or in the future. Now, I will say, you know, the book, we launched this book about 4 years ago. And as a result of the book, as I say, PurpleSpace was born, and network leaders started to notice the messages and start to translate those messages into the activities. And we're already seeing a significant change in terms of how people are prepared to share information, the use of authentic storytelling campaigns. So that's starting to change. So the next slide, if I may, Eric, thank you. So what do networks do? What do networks and allies actually do here? So you can see their little picture. We talk about, you know, the top of the shop. So some of the great work that you're doing and the other country-specific employer networks are doing are rolling out fantastic good practice and best practice when it comes to policy, practice and procedure. So for instance, helping an organisation to feel more confident in how it creates routine processes in, say, the workplace adjustment process. Other examples would be about line management training. It might be about how you improve customer service delivery, a whole raft of things that organisations either have to do because of the legislation, either encouraged to do because of the Convention on Human Rights, or local laws, etc. So the things that an organisation will want to do because they want to do the right thing, and or the law leans on them. And then at the other end, you have what I call individuals who are grappling. So going back to the messages in the book, as we know, so if we marry up, on the one hand, most people will acquire their disability at work, and therefore they are often you know, left reeling in and struggling to make sense of this human experience. They often take a wee while before they build inner confidence and resilience. And so networks are beautifully placed to translate what the organisation wants to do to be supportive and helpful and mine their talent. And equally, they're in that sweet spot where they encourage others to bring their authentic selves to work. So the beauty of networks is almost like a translation, supporting individuals to hear the organisation wants to do well by them, and equally supporting the business to learn directly from their own people. And then what else? Just a couple of trends. As I've mentioned, storytelling. What we do a lot is to support our members and others to notice the huge value in telling stories, not for telling stories' sake. We do a lot of work to support our members to think carefully about how they encourage their people to share their story. In other words, what do you want people to think, feel and do as a result of a story? What do you want business leaders to be moved to action as a result of that story? As we know, disability is a human experience that can take many years for us to make sense of. And through telling stories, sometimes we make sense of that. But if you catch someone who's a little too early in their story, they may not be well practiced in how to land that story. So a lot of work to think about what you want these authentic storytelling campaigns to look like and feel like and land. And then as I'm just looking at the watch, a couple of things I want to mention before I hand over to my colleague. I think the critical factors, I know many of you either have networks or looking to set them up. A couple of things I would offer in terms of high-performing networks. So those that are really delivering impact over time and are measuring their success over time. We see a number of things. First, we see that those networks are embedded into the business. So there's an integral link with the business inclusion and diversity objectives. And we see as many different types of network, many different types of governing instrument, and there isn't one size fit all. It would be wrong to suggest that there is. There has to be It has to be led by how the organisation is largely organised when they choose to do resource groups. But certainly we see high-performing networks. There's a strong link between what they do and how they're embedded. What else? Light touch governance around the leadership, and a strong emphasis on storytelling and what I call the magic trio, D&I, the lead of the network and the champion all aligned. And then finally, that last slide, Eric, before I close, the trends, as I say, strong emphasis on authentic storytelling, strong emphasis on repositioning the workplace adjustment process as a responsibility, not favours. So starting to reframe that. We see a huge trend in how the work Caroline Casey is doing with Valuable 500 and the networks being prepared to what we would call speak truth to power. They ask the simple yet difficult questions, and particularly they're all involved in making it easier for people to notice that universal experience. And then lastly, you know, what we're doing with PurpleSpace, what we love about the work that you're doing with the network, Yves, and Stefan, is, you know, the way in which you're encouraging employers to notice deeply and respectfully the United Nations Day of Persons with Disabilities. And as one way of us marking that day, we have encouraged networks to join together across the Purple Light Up. And you can see on the next slide, the next few slides, as a for example, you can see there one organisation, EY, just using the Purple Light Up around the 3rd of December each year as an opportunity to mobilise the business, to reframe what the disability agenda, and more importantly, to articulate what their business actions are going to be. Again, in the next slide, you can see what they did over in Europe, and then on the next slide, what they did in the UK. So business leaders doing videos, buildings going purple, but then very simple things. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a building that has to go purple. You can do some very simple things to mark respectfully the United Nations Day of Persons with Disabilities. So as I close there, that very last slide, and one, yeah, great. So what we're all about is really building this worldwide community of change agents, and I suppose supporting them to be the best internal change agents that they can be. So I will close there.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you for this very comprehensive presentation. I must say that from a big company perspective, one of the values of PurpleSpace is really that it provides a platform to connect the dots between the different business resource groups for these different members to have a very structured conversation around disability inclusion and their own agenda. So thank you very much for that, Kate. I will now present our second speaker, Rogier Reinders. Rogier is Global Marketing Director at Dow. He's also the chair of Dow's Disability Employee Network for Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and India, EMEAI. Rogier has held his position as Global Marketing Director since 2016 and has worked on Dow DuPont, formerly as a subsidiary of Dow Corning, for 15 years. From 2003 to 2011, Rogier served as Global Transportation Market Manager, where he was responsible for operational and strategic group leadership of sales, marketing, and technical service function. So, Rogier, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Yves. I hope you hear me well. Thanks for sharing the slides, and sorry for all those difficult words in the introduction. So thank you, Kate, for an excellent introduction. Yes, my name is Rogier Reinders. I work at Dow. Dow is a big chemical company. You may sleep on a polyurethane bed or use some packaging, polyethylene packaging, or maybe use materials in your bathroom or in your smartphone from this company. And yeah, we are very happy to be invited to speak a bit about how we run those ERGs, and specifically, of course, the one on disability is a very important topic. And I want to approach it in the broadest sense. So look at invisible, visible disabilities, temporary, non-temporary, and also we look particularly at mental fitness at work and mental health in general. So again, thank you very much. Let's flip the page. So just a bit of background on how we see in this company diversity and inclusion. Diverse is what we really are as company, and inclusion is what we aim to be. Something is really about bringing the best out in our people, creating an environment of trust where everybody can contribute to its fullest best. So actually what we typically say, we speak more about inclusion and diversity, because inclusion really comes first as a culture, and only if we have that right, we can have all the different diversities we have in this company come to fruition, and we can unlock the value of all those diversities. So the bit of context, let's flip the page. And then, yeah, really a bit more on how we run ERGs. I'm not saying this is the best way, but for now it seems to work for us. And of course, we want to learn through discussions like these and get better. We have about 8 ERGs in Dow. They range from the women's network to Prime, that's for folks 50 and above, to one that is for youngsters that just join. And of course, then we link them to Prime to get the 50 and up, to get the experience going. And various others, African American network, Asian diversity network, and today, and that's the little logo we have at the bottom, that's how we call our disability employee network, DEN. Very interesting. I had some contact with Kate up front, and she said, what does it mean for the employees, these kind of networks? And I typed some things here. It's very relevant for many of our employees, which you see here. It's really an opportunity for them to get a purpose in their job, to do broad networking, to get visibility and even broader outside just the employee. You can also look at what does it mean for customers or communities or the culture of the company. And I hear people really appreciate the way they can serve the company and serve the customers better, understand the customers better, have more appreciation of the broader customer base we have. So for us, it really works as a motivator. So let's go to the next slide and get a bit more into the few slides we prepared. So how do ERGs work in this company, this particular example? We see several elements here on the top, and we have gone to external research on best practices, and then we of course had some internal research and debate to get to these priorities, and Kate actually mentioned a few of those elements as well, and the few slides I have remaining, they are actually about each time about one of those topics. So we see executive involvement, which was already mentioned. We can go still back. I'm not fully done yet, Jurgen. Thank you. So that's an important point. And then the link to success. We also see that as an important one. So how do these ERGs, and in this case disability ERG, how does that link to success? And can we prove that success? Can we show that success? The one in the middle there is about the goals. We want absolute clarity on the goals that are specific, measurable, realistic, time-driven. So, and we post those goals. We're quite focused on that. The other element here is processes, policies, practices. We have to have those published, clear, and working. I will come back to that in a second. And on the right, it's really more the governance, or how do we manage this, and so that it's not a one-off activity, but it's synergistic, it's ingrained in the company. So really those 5 things, they guide us, and those are the 5 topics I want to address a bit more. On the bottom here, we see a few quotes from actually from employees, and we see some enthusiasm and also some skepticism. I think they're already a year or so old, but of course we want through our activities and strategy and good work, the enthusiastic ones to thrive and take control, so to say. So let's look at some of those elements I mentioned here on the next one. The first one, yeah, that's about executive involvement. A few examples from the kitchen of this company, Dow. We see here an expression that you can read yourself, but it does really mention how we believe these ERGs can help the company, the business, and of course also the people, their careers, and the society at large. So what we hear in our company is every manager, so every person with people responsibility, should be active in an ERG. That's one statement that our CEO has given. What we always see if managers go around the different sites as the world is that they always visit and speak about these topics, and that then gives opportunity for people to network in a different way than their typical day-to-day job. People refer to it regularly, like we actually do with safety, for example. Safety for a chemical company, or I think for any company, is really very high on the agenda, and actually most meetings start with a moment of reflection on inclusion and diversity as well as safety. And then there's support in terms of time frequently, and where possible also budget. So this is really kind of the examples we can come up with when it comes to executive involvement. The other element, and that's on the next slide, is one of those 5 elements I mentioned that for us make ERGs work, and we do this the same with every ERG, and we do it the same globally. So you could say this is a way we globalize ERGs, is to indeed link this to success, and that means you progress in terms of getting the best talent in your company. Absolutely crucial, and it could well be an autistic seller. I once had the example, I think it was Cisco, speaking about that. I thought it was quite interesting. So that could very well be. It's just getting the best talent on board. What we also see here on the slide is about decision making, better decision making, driving innovation. You can imagine, if you have to think outside of the box, that you don't want your workforce to be too much thinking in one way. Increasing customer insights, so diversity and inclusion can play a role. Disability can play a role to get much better insights. Motivation of employees, we already mentioned a bit how that works. People that have see more value in their work, get more purpose in their work. Speak with different employees. For me personally, it really works like that. It's very nice to work with people that typically I would not work with. I think there's even 1 or 2 colleagues on the phone of Dow here today. Elsewise, I would not have known those people, quite literally. And then linked to success, improving the image and almost the license to operate. So for us, the business case is very clear, and there's even a diversity dividend. We see that here on the right. Companies in the top quartile for diversity, they outperform the ones in the bottom quartile. There's a few numbers mentioned here. So it is also very healthy business. And we, of course, hear these things more often, but I think, I hope that some of these details here make sense. On top, we see some of the external acknowledgement we got specifically in the field of the disabilities at work. So that's also important, of course. So let's make a turn in terms of slides to the next one. So, okay, there's a link to success, but what about the goals we have? What are the typical goals that this company uses? Well, they're here. On the left is the employee survey. It's something we do every year. And specifically in that survey, there's a section about how do we advance? How do people see the advancement in terms of diversity and the diverse perspective? And we expect to see more positive outcomes. So I think this is measurable. The second point here is ERG activation. How many people are active in those ERGs? What do the ERG groups actually do in terms of work, which is of course even more important. So that's something we look at. Another measurable thing is the spend with diverse suppliers, and we're looking to increase that spend and achieve, and then compare and see what is top benchmark performance look like. Number 4 is looking at representation. If you have 50% men, 50% women, what does that look like in your leadership positions? Very typical example we use, but we can use that more broadly, and it's measurable and it's clear. And finally, we look also at how can we, get some external acknowledgement of things we do. And how does this relate to our reputation as a leading company in this field? So let's move one slide and go to another point in these things that we think are important, and that is about processes, policies, and I wanted to just give a few examples here. Different policies and different processes exist. They are written out. They can be shared. They're easy to access. They're understandable, and most of the time they seem to work fairly well. So a few ones we have is a respect policy that ensures that there's the barriers that adversely impact an employee based on typical diversity, are that there's no place for that in this company. Various training courses. This is actually print screens from our intranet. It's just one example, but various training courses exist. I think just on disability alone, there are probably, I showed them earlier to Jurgen from the ILO, there's probably 10 or 15, so people can self-educate on that. And some of them are actually mandatory as well for folks that enter the company. And then just one example that is on the screen here that is very practical, but an example for disabled colleagues on getting adjustment when it comes to accommodation. So what do they need? Is this hardware? Is this software? Are there special needs relative to emergency evacuations or access that are required? So this is accessible, and we aim to have that correctly managed, written out, and published. So let's move to the last point, also in light of time, because we want to answer a few questions at the end as well. And that is, and Kate also referred to this, making this part of the company DNA, not let this be a one-off effort, but really making sure that IND is part of the governance, the way the company acts and thinks. And that means it has to come from various levels. So the way we have it spelled out is there's an office of inclusion that pulls this all together. The head of that is actually our chief human resources officer. And then we have activities at 3 levels. So the first one is, we call it the President's Inclusion Council. That's chaired by the CEO. And that council really sets the D&I strategy, the scope and the strategy for the company. Then we have senior management in the different regions. We call that the Senior Leaders Inclusion Council. They still speak about diversity and inclusion across the different ERGs in the region, and they start executing and supporting that strategy. And then we have on the right, we call Joint Inclusion Council. That is where all the different ERGs are. For example, the Disability Employment Network, Employee Network we have in Europe, Middle East, Africa, India is about 15 ERGs, most of the time per company or small cluster of companies, and that starts to be very action driven. So we take the strategy idea, we boil that down to 3 or 4 or 5 elements that are relevant for that region, very strongly linked to the global strategy, but there can be 1 or 2 points that are specific to the region. And then we start to think about, okay, what are the actions per country in function of time also that we want to undertake. Now, these actions, we always like to interact with external companies, with suppliers, with community, and then frequently, of course, around the theme of disability, day in the life of kind of events. And we have like that probably 5, 6, 7 events in EMEAI per month. So very nice. And then we share those back, we speak about them, so it makes people enthusiastic, and it gives one country an idea about what another country did. And we frequently publish the event always internally. Maybe sometimes something pops up on LinkedIn, but most of the times it's internal. We could think about being broader about that, but and then actually it's communicated and discussed, and that works quite well. So all of this governance, that's not for bureaucracy, it's just a structure in support of an environment where every employee can contribute and make it part of the DNA of the company. So let's flip page, which actually concludes my story. I hope I'm timely. And as said, I spoke about those 5 elements. We think they're crucial in the functioning. I'm not implying that everything works perfectly at all. I think it takes a lot of respect and listening and continuous efforts, but that's kind of the structure we use, and we use the same structure for every region and for every ERG. So that's just a bit of a look in the kitchen of Dow on how we run this. So hand it over to Yves, and very much welcome any questions now or later.
Thank you very much, Rogier. Or Rogier. Sorry for the pronunciation. Yeah. Okay. Actually, it really illustrates, your approach really illustrates the fact that without a minimum of structure and executive involvement, nothing really concrete happens. Because, you know, many companies prefer to look at the bottom-up approach, leveraging their employee resource group only. Others will take the other way around. We'll look at making sure that executive involvement is there without taking into account the employee's perspective. And you obviously put in place a structure that cover all layers of responsibilities. And so obviously it works pretty well. So thank you again, to both our speakers today, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for Q&A. I can see 8 questions already posted. Eric, would you like maybe to look at the different questions and assign them?
Yes, hi there, Yves. Thank you very much. We received a number of very interesting questions. I'm going to group the first set in terms of, they're very practical questions, and I'm going to group them together, and then either Kate or Rogier can respond to them. And here I'll read this tranche out, and if there are other pending questions, we'll see if we can get to them before the end of the meeting. So the first set of practical questions were, do you suggest ERGs to be project driven? That is perhaps one project per ERG. The other practical question was, again, the nuts and bolts of what's the optimal number of members for an efficient ERG? And then shifting, this is not about the ERG, it's about DENs. How is the best way to manage and facilitate an international DEN in spite of the fact there are various cultural definitions of disability? So, and if there are any suggestions for good practices. So we'll start with that. It's kind of nuts and bolts, suggestions you have. And I'll leave it there to the two panels. Thank you very much.
Have a first stab. Would that be okay? I see you nodding, Roger.
Yes, please, of course.
Okay, well, let me have a first stab of those questions. The first, in terms of project driven, as I say, we see as many different types of ERGs as there are organisations. So there's no, I'm not trying to avoid the question, but my advice would be not necessarily to go down that road. ERGs, we often call them as vehicles to drive change rather than destinations. And you know, there's lots of different types of definition about what is a network, what is an employee resource group. Some organisations talk about business resource groups, and business resource groups tend to be entities that are funded to deliver projects. So for example, they might do a drains up, a root and branch analysis of, say, for example, the workplace adjustment process, and that resource group is actually resourced to be part of the decision-making process. But in terms of, but mostly I see resource groups as vehicles to deliver great messages about what individuals need to do to lean into their careers. What are the big messages that they need to give the business across all of the areas, a kind of whole organization approach to change. So I wouldn't necessarily advise, certainly in the early days, that you think about a project-driven approach. That said, we, you know, all networks are in the game of delivering certain activities. And, you know, again, the best approach is often to have 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're going to do within the course of the year and do them well, and obviously liaise closely with the champion and the D&I lead. In terms of, let me do them all and then hand back to my colleague, Roger. I think number of members in an ERG, again, it's a bit of a red herring. I wouldn't encourage networks to get overly fixated on the numbers. In the early days, the most important thing to do is to get things moving. You know, have a leader who's looking to reach out to volunteers. As we know, all of the individuals associated in delivering a resource group are doing this on the side of the desk. And we have an expression here in the UK, and you hear it across the world: if you want something done, ask the busiest person. So, you know, in the early days, don't overly worry about how many individuals are going to join your network. The best thing to do is to start to create a little plan, start to think about what you're going to deliver and how you're going to deliver a storytelling campaign. And then lastly, in terms of international networks, again, different structures, I think the best way to get different networks aligned to an overarching plan is to focus on the universal truth around disability. So think about, for example, we talked about how hard it is to share personal information. Think about whether you can tee up some volunteers in different countries, and then in those particular jurisdictions, think about how you can seed the idea of a storytelling campaign that takes account of those cultural sensitivities as well as opportunities. You know, we often talk about cultural constraints, but there are as many opportunities. So those would be my thoughts. Roger, over to you.
Yeah, let me unmute. No, I largely agree. What I could add is what we do when it comes to participation is we want to make sure that if somebody joins an ERG, he or she is active. I believe that that's the best way to enjoy activities with your colleagues and with outside folks. So actually, typically, if somebody joins, we motivate the ERG leader to welcome the person, to explain a bit about what we're doing, of course, and then involve the manager, show some appreciation that the person does this, and then make sure that some of the activities, and I agree, it's not only activity based, but there's other things you have to do as well, but make sure that the person is, I would say, at least active in one or two events or activities that year, because that's the best way to start appreciating the work. So as long as the amount of people still allows that to happen, I don't think there's a maximum. Yeah, the rest, I'm very much in agreement with Kate.
Thank you for the responses. I'm grouping two again together that are about practical nuts and bolts and practices. The first one is about how could ERGs encourage voluntary disclosure of disabilities so company programs are more targeted or responsive? And then how could you get more people with disabilities, include them within organizations through ERGs?
Okay, shall I have a go at the first? Roger, would that be helpful? In
Please.
terms of what is often called disclosure, I mentioned the book Secrets and Big News, and we're not a huge fan of the words disclosure and declaration. We, all of us as individuals, will often fall into the trap of talking about disclosure rates or declaration rates. And what we did 4 years ago with the book was to call out sometimes the unintended consequences of us using language that is a little off-putting. So, and what I mean by that is if we use the language of disclosure, we're suggesting other people have a secret. If we use the language of declaration, we may be suggesting those individuals have a big piece of news. Why I mention that is because, as we know, it can be incredibly hard for individuals to share their experience of disability. We know that. It's a universal thing because of the language of disability. It's a limited language. It's all we have. Across the world, there is no move for any governments or laws to change that language. It is limited, but it's the best that we can have. And yet, so coming back to the question, so how does a network help people to share? That's what we would call it. How do networks improve the rate by which people bring their authentic selves to work? And what we're seeing is that just by normalizing difference, just by saying, well, we're a multinational business, we believe in all of our talent, wherever they are, whatever that human difference is, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's sexuality, whether it's disability. People matter, and we recruit on merit. We are open to all types of talent. And therefore, by having a resource group and calling out the brilliance of your purple talent, your disability talent, you suddenly just make it easier for people to be who they are in the context of work. And whether it's your webinars or events or activities or lunchtime meetings, by default, you're just making it easier, and because you're creating visibility, you're spotlighting on disability. And guess what happens over time? the metrics go up. The metrics go up. We just see it again and again and again, that about 2 years after an employee resource group comes alive, the metrics start to go up. Anyway, that was my little bit. Roger,
Yeah.
what about you? What
No, very much what I've seen. Dow has almost 40,000 employees now, and I just can only witness that what you say is true. We've seen that since we have more and more. I think it's partially also under the new CEO. We have more and more activities like this, and it's just absolutely true. And I can only imagine how liberating this is for the folks that make this declaration. I like that word also, indeed, more as disclosure, and the impact it has to our whole company. The impact these real stories have is just enormous. So yeah, it's absolutely what we see as well in practice in our company.
Hello. Yes. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. There's a general question, probably the last question we may have for the session, and it takes it from disability issues to other issues. How can ERGs on disabilities learn from ERGs on other issues? And if either one of you would like to discuss that.
Can I
either
clarify
one.
the question, Eric? Just to clarify the question, do you mean what can disability resource groups learn from other people, networks or resource groups?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I think, you know, one of the challenges for all people networks is that I suppose the danger of employee resource groups is that we accidentally start to silo aspects of our identity, our human identity. As we know, as human beings, we are complex creatures, and we carry a multitude of different identities, some of which are enshrined in law in terms of protected characteristics, and others are not. So, you know, as a human being, some people will have children and some people not. Some of us will experience huge grief and some of us not, you know, and in different parts of our life, those different aspects of our human identity matter or not. So coming back to the question, ERGs, I think, that really flourish are those that work in harmony with each other. So there are lots of different, you know, there's lots of similarities across protected characteristics. An easy one is around what we call sharing personal information, as we say, often referred to as declaration or disclosure. And you see that often played out within LGBT plus networks as well as disability networks. Equally, in terms of mental health, we often see the growth of mental health networks, and they too, when they work in partnership with other networks in terms of ethnicity, etc., can work well together. So there's lots of learning across the piece. Roger, you must have lots of experience of that in Dow.
Yeah, no, I think it's just a cultural thing that happens, and that's probably the most important thing within the different regions, that we have to improve the way we work together with, you know, when it comes to ERGs. Sometimes we have activities happening, and one day we speak about A, and the next day we speak about B, and I sometimes believe we can cluster these things more and make the impact even bigger, but we still have to, you know, keep the eye for detail in that. So that's a bit the balance, and quite operational, but I think the main advantage is to have a culture where we, you know, where there's eye for diversity, and there's an inclusive culture, and that's what matters. And as I tried to mention a bit, is we try to have a similar kind of process and similar kind of priorities for all the different ERGs, so that you know, it's quite clear on how it functions, and we can get some synergies between them. But yeah, for us, I don't think it's perfect yet how we do that, but you know, in the end of the day, it's just a cultural larger thing we're going through. And yeah, I do think that is working, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Thank you very much to both our presenters today. I think this was really a great conversation. I want to thank also the participants for their active participation by posting their question and answer. Of course, as I said, on behalf of the GBDN, I want to thank all of you, both participants and panelists, for our meeting today. And you will see here now your feedback on today's webinar. Please feel free to answer the questions so that you can vote and so that we can make sure that GBN team will be able to continuously improve the quality of their webinar. So thank you, everybody. And I hope that you equally enjoy this very, very interesting conversation. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.